Okay, so this is the third video lecture on the topic of lifespan development. The previous lecture, I was talking about synaptic pruning and how important it is to have an enriched environment that will maximize cognitive or neural growth and development. This slide is about cognition. Hopefully, you remember that cognition means thinking, and one of the things that's critical or central to the research of the work of developmental psychologists is how we learn to think. And specifically, it's bolded and underlined here. The answer to the question is that babies think different than adults. I mean, all of the research, that's the big takeaway, is that babies and children do not think the same way that adults think. We as parents get very frustrated with our children sometimes and don't understand why they don't get it. Well, they don't get it because their brain has not developed in a way that allows them to understand certain things. Now, there's a handful of cognitive developmental psychologists that have different theories as to how children learn to think, the different stages, but they all agree that children do not think the same way. And that's the big point that I want to make. So when we get frustrated, again, when we as parents get frustrated with our teenagers, with our middle schoolers, with our elementary school children, and what are you thinking? Well, they're not thinking the same way we think. So this slide lists some of the different terms associated with the cognitive research. You may have heard of the fellow by the name of Pinochet. He's the one that's famous for that's what this picture is supposed to illustrate, are the different stages in cognitive development. In this class, I don't ask you to remember what those stages are, but do understand that a small child, this is in the sensory motor. So if you think about, infants and toddlers, how they put everything in their mouth, this is because they are using their senses of touch and smell and taste. And this is where there's a lot of nerve endings are around our mouth. And that is how they're learning about their world, because they are sensory motors. They want to touch. Then we get to a more sophisticated understanding of the world, and a child labels everything, right? That's what we would call pre-operational, and that's what you see in this 2 to 7 years old, right? Everything is concrete, so to speak. Then another stage is, and this is where this what we call concrete operational, a classic research that's been done during this stage is this what's referred to as conservation error. And that is where what you have here is this child, and he has a short glass of water and a tall glass of water. Conservation error is when a child doesn't understand that it's the same amount of water in both glasses, but they choose the tall one because it's taller, and they perceive that there is more fluid, there's more milk or whatever, chocolate milk, in this tall glass, even though they're the same. Another example is you take a graham cracker and you offer a child a whole graham cracker, or you break that graham cracker in half and ask them if they would rather have half of the broken one or the whole, and a child will take, how does that work exactly? And they'll pick different amount. I forget. Shoot, I forget which one that they pick because anyway. But they don't understand that it's actually the same. I think they pick the two halves because that's two to them as opposed to the one whole. They'll take the two halves. I think that's how that works. But anyway, they don't understand that it's the same. That's conservation error. And then finally, you see the formal operation, and this is when we begin to think abstractly. So the ability to understand cause and effect, the ability to understand like if then, we are not born with that. We learned that through a series of stages. Another couple really important terms here are object permanence. And object permanence is the ability to understand that simply because you cannot see something, it is still there. So, a classic example of object permanence is peekaboo. So, a child who plays peekaboo doesn't understand that you can still see them because they can't see you. That's egocentrism. I'm sorry, but or you take and you cover up a toy, or dogs. Is it dogs do understand object permanence? If you cover up a toy that at a certain developmental stage, a child will not look for it because they don't understand that that object is permanent and it's under the toy. But at a later stage of cognitive development, they will lift up the blanket because they know the toy is under there. They know that object is permanent. And just because they can't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Scale error is when we understand that we can't get in a toy car, right? We can get in big cars, but we don't understand. So we might see a child trying to like get in a toy car because they can, like a little miniature toy car kind of thing. And then a schema, we'll talk about schema in the chapter on memory too. A schema is simply, it's a theoretical concept that explains how our memories work, and that so you're learning about airplanes, right? And your mother is showing you pictures of an airplane in a book, and she says this is an airplane. You see it has wings, so you now have a schema that an airplane has wings. Well, then you see a bird, and your mother points out that it has wings. So your schema has an airplane has wings. So you see a bird and you say airplane, and your mother says, no, that's not an airplane, that's a bird. Okay, well, in your schema, wings were associated with airplanes. Well, now you're given new information. And so you have to assimilate that new information that has wings, but it's not an airplane, it's a bird. And so you have to accommodate. It's basically a fancy way of saying that when we're very small, we sort everything out into a few groups. And as we come to understand more about the world, those groups become more specific because we have to assimilate. And yeah. Okay, well, I'm not going to put those in an essay discussion question, right? But there's some terms that you'll see in the human growth and development. Other terms about cognition, and so these are older children cognition. This one is intended to illustrate, I think it's actually intended to illustrate egocentrism. So you can see the parent is on the phone, they're asking the child, what are you playing with? And the child doesn't have the comprehension, the recognition they know their parent is in the other room, but the child thinks that what I can see, you can see too. And that's egocentrism. Ego meaning self, that you see, the exact same thing I do. The growth away from egocentrism is this idea of theory of mind. And theory of mind, this is a really important concept. So I can imagine me putting this one on a quiz question. The theory of mind says is that we understand that other people think differently. So it's the acknowledgement, the understanding, the comprehension that I have a mind and you have a mind, but what's in your mind is different than what's in my mind. You don't see the same things I see. You don't think the same things that I think, but basically it's the realization that other people have a different perspective, right? Theory of mind is essential for empathy. So when we get to the chapters on emotions, and even into some of the social psychology stuff, people that lack theory of mind, that lack the recognition that everyone does not see and feel the same way I do, have a very hard time getting along with people, right? Because they don't. This is a fundamentally essential understanding about the way people are in the world, and that is your mind is different. I have a mind, you have a mind, and yours is different than mine. Right? I have experiences, or I have feelings, I have opinions, you have feelings, and you have opinions, and they're not the same as mine. Theory of mind. Other folks that talk about cognition, you've got a fella by the name of Vygotsky. He's one of my favorites, actually, and he argues that we learn about our place in the world. We learn to think through our language. and that our language is what our language as oh goodness gracious. Um, it's by understanding language that we learn to think. So if you think about the way, if you it's circular, if you think about the way that we think in words, right? And Vygotsky argued that our thinking, our understanding of the world is limited by our understanding of language. So it's it's as a child learns, as they learn more language, as they're more connected, have they have more experiences with other people, that their ability to understand the world and their ability to for cognitive processing um, is is changed. So, oh, here you go. Here would be a good example that say I only speak English, right? But I know in Spanish there are a handful. There's like at least 5 different terms for love. In English, there's only one, and so I can't. That means that in Spanish there are more nuanced cultural understanding of love than I have because my language limits my cultural understanding. My language limits my ability to think abstractly and complexly about love, that we are limited in our ability to think by the language that we have. I hope that makes some sense. Okay, and well, we'll talk more. That's one. Another concept that falls under Vygotsky is this concept of scaffolding. If you think about this, is really important in the world of education. If you think about what a scaffold is it's a structure that people can climb up, right? And so they can build things and they can paint things. So scaffolding is an educational cognitive concept that says that the way that we learn, the way our cognition, our ability to think develops, is we have to kind of gradually go up. So we have what teachers and mentors help us do is they help us provide the scaffolding so that so in other words, an example of scaffolding would be you would not learn multiplication and division before you would learn addition and subtraction. You would not learn addition and subtraction before you learned how to count, right? So each one of those acts as a scaffold to understand the next concept. And so it's important for people that want to help children learn that they recognize, that they understand where they are already at cognitively. So an instructor might say, well, what do you already understand? And then I can then I can build then I can build the structure of the scaffold to help you move up to the next level. Okay, I've gone over my 10 minutes. I'm going to stop right here.